quizzing can be a force for good, right? Because, I mean, that's one reason why I keep encouraging both my boys to quiz, and they participate in the Quizzing 101 quiz. They participate in the Junior World Quizzing Championship. I guess opens their mind to other things, other cultures, other possibilities, and I guess at the end of the day, realizing that there's something called facts, and facts and opinion are not always the same. Yeah.
With me today is Ravi Avva, the newly crowned World Quizzing Champion. Welcome, Ravi.
Hi, Gareth. Thanks for having me here.
How's life been since you topped the table?
Not too much has changed there. It took a while to sink in because I knew I'd done well. I certainly didn't expect to win, but I think it looks like a lot of other people didn't do as well as I thought they would.
I did a preview. I don't know if you've seen it on the channel. We did a preview of who we thought might be the kind of likely candidates for the title. Didn't include you, although somebody posted in the comments before the championship, what about Ravi Avva in Singapore and Movin Miranda? Yeah, and it was like, okay, yeah, good call. When you went into to do the quiz, what did you think you could achieve? What do you think that the best result could be?
Well, I knew I'd been improving quite a bit because I've been, and lockdown certainly helped there. I've been doing, I've been pretty diligent about doing a lot of the IQA quizzes over the last 4 or 5 years. But that was typically the Hot 100 quiz every week. And then the WQC and the occasional Americas quiz. But I guess after we went into lockdown, I've been doing the British GP quizzes every month. There's a lot more quizzing with the Quizzing World Cup, and I guess IQA's quizzing Stoke database has a bunch of papers that I wound up getting hold of and doing quite a bit as well. So I knew I was improving. So my Hot 100 scores had gone up from 60 something a couple of years back to close to 80 this year, and so there were quite a few Hot 100 quizzes were around 6 or 7 points off the top. So I expected that I'd and you never know. It depends on whether questions fall your way, and whether the subjects are things that favor you in comparison to others. But having given the quiz, I definitely expected that I'd be somewhere in the top 10 or 15. I knew I was likely to get 150 plus. I think what I probably didn't expect was that over the scores overall would be a little bit lower, because I did find some of the sections to be potentially a little bit easier than last year.
Okay, it's interesting. Did you sit it like the traditional printed paper version? Because I know some people sat it, and I sat it online using a computer program. Did you send it?
I did the online version. Online version using I think the new software package that June and had put in play.
Okay, yeah. So that would made it a very different experience from previous. But you managed to prosper. Did you do? You said you've been doing a lot of quizzing, IQ8 papers, British Quiz Grand Prix, etc. Did you do any particular focused preparation for this tournament? Did you think, okay, the setters approach it in this particular way, so I'm gonna do something a little bit different from normal?
So I didn't quite, I guess, think of it that way. I knew the areas I wasn't too good at. I did cram for some of them. I let go of entertainment, which I guess consistently every year is the topic that I'm not great, and I can't bring myself to be too excited about. So I know going in I'm going to be dropping entertainment regardless of the quiz. Whether it's the World Quizzing Championship or whether it's the British GP, entertainment is the one that I always drop. So I I think leaving that, I did wind up spending weekends, I think brushing up, I think cramming a little bit for other areas that I knew that I wasn't particularly good at, and that helped. I think about sports, for instance. I mean, I've generally been pretty good at football and track and field, and things like swimming and so on. A lot of the traditional Olympic sports. I guess the last few years I've started to read up and get a lot better at I guess winter sports as well, and I mean helped along the way that I wound up actually doing a couple of them on my travels. I've never been great at American sports. So, I mean, baseball, basketball, or American football. I mean, it helped that there weren't too many questions on that this time. I think there was one question on basketball which I missed, and then I guess the other area where I've not been that great is video games. I know a few, and I don't know a few others, but again, what's been pretty helpful in the last 2-3 years is I've got kids who are at an age where they do play a lot of video games. So I think just by way of policing them, I've started to get a little bit more familiar there. Yeah.
So you pick up a lot by osmosis from the family as well. So
yeah, and I mean I've had there was this one question in swimming around a German swimmer who's not won a lot of Olympic medals and still holds the records in 400-meter freestyle, for instance, Paul Biederman. And that's something that I probably would not have known a few years back, but I guess got a bit more of a personal connection to swimming now because I've got an older boy who's a teenager who trains with a swim club. And, I mean, I ferry him across for his training 6 days a week in the morning. And,
wow. Okay.
Yeah, and I mean, he keeps telling me his times. I try to keep track of that, and along the way, I just started to read up on, I mean, who got the records, what are the best timings, and things like that. So that was very satisfying.
Talking of satisfying, what was the question that you came away thinking most pleased about having got right?
So for me, I guess I'm really pleased with this question that I've got a personal connection to. So there were a couple. I mean, the swimming one was one for sure. There was one that I spoke to Jane about a couple of days back, and this was the 11th question in culture. So I think the question talked about, it's a question from Finnish mythology, and it talks about an artifact made by the blacksmith Ilmarinen, and what's that artifact? And that was the Sampo mill, and that's something that I mean, it's one of the central story arcs of the Kalevala, Finnish national epic, and an abridged version of that book was one of the first books I read, actually probably the very first. And I think over time I've read the Kalevala in full. I know the language as well. I've picked it up over time, and I've read it in both English and Finnish. And I mean, it's a spectacular country I've always loved, and so that made me really happy. I mean, gave me a good feeling of the. There was another, I guess, in media. I forget the question number, but I talked about the book Quo Vadis.
Yes.
And,
yes.
Yeah, and I remember seeing. I think there was a 1951 movie based on the book with Robert Taylor in the lead role.
Yeah,
I'd watched as a kid, and I read the book later. So I mean, I knew the author was Henrik Sienkiewicz, so that was particularly satisfying. I mean, these were things that I guess part of my growing up. So
yeah, it's great when you get those because they feel almost like 3 points because you haven't had to work for them in the same way. So it's kind of like just. Yeah, it's the kind of almost a serendipity that it comes up for you. Was there anything on the flip side of that you think you were kicking yourself because you felt absolutely should have got that one, that was a bad miss?
Yeah, I mean, there were a couple, I think both in history. There was one in media where I think there's a question that talked about the Millions Prize for poetry or something. And I mean, I knew that, but I misread the question and put the UAE instead of Arabic.
Right.
They'd asked for the language. So yeah, one of those. It's I mean, at least with me, I have to have an exceptionally good day not to have a single question that I've not misread at some point.
Yeah.
And, there were a couple in history that I did get annoyed with myself about. I think there was one about the country that got into a war with Peru, some of the territory, and I mean, should have known it was Ecuador. I'd answered Bolivia to, I guess, one questions, and I just went ahead and put Bolivia again.
Yeah, there was a Bolivar thing, and all of a sudden you start thinking, oh my God, if they've just been reading up on Bolivia. I think I put exactly the same answer. I think I put Bolivia for that war, because it was like, I know it's got to be a neighboring country. So yeah. And I think that's exactly what I did.
Yeah. There was another one in history around the Kingdom of the Franks, and I made that one, and I think the time of the Merovingian period, and it was just a bad miss. So that's okay. I think to compensate that, there was some. I mean, I'm not much of a guesser. I tend to know my subject or not know it, but I think there were. I think quite a few questions that worked for me.
I think the one thing I found doing it, I felt that there were quite a few questions related to India, which there always is, and it's fair enough because it's a massive country and people take part. But the one country which I always think I come away thinking I wish I knew more about is Japan, because the amount of questions that come up about Japan, I always think if you were just a good quizzer who happened to know about Japan as well, that would be a really real advantage in that. Were there any areas that you looked at it and thought, oh, this stuff just keeps coming up and that's really in my ballpark?
Questions on Japan, yes. I mean, I've spent a lot of time there, both on and traveling with family. It's I mean, it's a country whose history and culture I've read up a bit about. I know. I usually, if I get questions on that, I guess there are a few questions on Japan. Given my background, obviously, and if there are questions on the Nordic countries, either Finland or Iceland and so on, it usually gives me a good feeling. I mean, those are parts of the world that I know really well.
Yeah, because we've heard that you've lived on 6 continents. So what countries? So we know. Did you live in Finland then for a while? Was that or?
Yes, so I worked across the Nordics, and I haven't lived in Finland, but I've visited Finland a lot of times. I mean, so I was in mainland Europe. So I was in Germany and then Vienna, and I've spent a lot of time in Finland, a little bit in Sweden as well, and quite a bit in the Netherlands. So it's I think that's one part of the world where I think I've just always been interested in learning more about, and and I think both history, culture, literature. I think spent quite some time reading up on that.
What sort of a learner are you? Are you the sort of person who can look at a list and it's in, or do you have to kind of read up and have strategies for remembering, or do you just suck things up naturally through your skin? How do you learn your quiz knowledge?
I think a lot depends on how interesting I find it. I mean, if I find interesting, it just kind of stays there. Otherwise, I have to work really hard at it. So so something like football, for instance, the sport I've always loved. I've never really been good at playing football, but watching football, I guess the first tournament I ever saw a lot of was the 1986 World Cup, when and Maradona was my hero at that point. And I think ever since then I got hooked onto football. So I've had a good, I guess, at this point, 34 years of following and watching football, and that's something that I mean, there are new things that happen all the time, but because I'm quite interested in it, it just kind of tends to stay in my head. And then if you look at something like I think music, for instance, yeah, I mean, I've put in some effort for both for the World Quizzing Championship and occasionally previous quizzes to try and learn stuff, but it's a grind. I mean, it's not something I'm particularly interested in. There's a very, I guess, narrow genre of music I listen to. It's really, I think it's largely two bands at this point. I mean, I listen to Led Zeppelin and listen to Sabbath, and that's really it. Okay. Outside, I think listening to music for pleasure is not something I do a lot of. So,
yeah,
it's a bit more academic there.
What was your sort of educational background? What was your degree in?
Yes, so I did my undergraduate degree in engineering.
Okay.
And, I mean, I studied at this university called the Indian Institute of Technology, which is, I think, the top engineering school in India. I think it was good in that I probably had a natural aptitude for it. I mean, though the area that I was always really interested in was mythology and ancient languages. So, but that's not a very, or at least when I was growing up, it wasn't a very viable career. Yeah, after my engineering degree, I wound up doing a degree in business, and then worked for a consulting firm. So I used to work for a consulting firm called McKinsey & Company. Then I went back to school to Columbia University to try and do, I wanted to actually do a doctoral degree. So I got started on that. I mean, was doing it from the business school, but really focused a lot on grounding it in sociology. And that was probably, I think, just in terms of learning and I guess really immersing myself deep into a subject, that was probably the best 3 years of my life, in the sense that I never got my PhD. I wound up dropping out a little bit before to a job offer with a multinational company. But I think for me it was fascinating. I mean, particularly having studied, I think, engineering and then business, and then being able to step back and read Emil Durkheim and Max Weber and Pierre Bourdieu and really understand about social systems and really immerse myself in that. It was probably the most fascinating 3 years of my life, and it was also probably the first place where I learned to, I mean, first and probably the only time that I really learned to think rather than study. I guess during my other degrees, a lot of it is really there is knowledge that's out there. You kind of figure out where that resides, and you study a little bit and learn how to paraphrase it, or I guess critique it or expound on it in some way.
You've got a very broad range of things under your belt, sort of academically, and that must stand you in good stead. Do you find things coming up in quizzing that you can relate back to your PhD or your undergraduate degree, even your work with the business elements of it?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, occasionally they do come up. So there was a question in sciences this time around that described the process of peer review, and something that I think as a doctoral student, that's one of the first things you learn. And so there are definitely things that do come up. I guess, though, I mean, something like the WQC, it's also a test of breadth of knowledge. I guess the areas that I do know well, I typically tend to know well because I've studied them or read quite a bit about them. So I guess the breadth of my knowledge is not, or at least it's getting better, but it wasn't as good as say a lot of the other top quizzes. And what's been helping a lot has been to I think read up and start to I think in a focused way prepare for something like the WQC.
How and when did you get into quizzing? We all start somewhere. Where was the genesis of your quizzing journey?
Oh, I got started when I was in school. So we used to have a few quizzes every now and then, and those were, I think, as you'd expect with a lot of school quizzes, typically capitals of countries and national flags and things like that. And then I wound up getting a bit more seriously into it during my university days. I wound up quizzing quite a bit during my undergraduate days in India, and quizzing took a bit of a backseat when I went over to the US. So I had a break of about 7 or 8 years where I didn't really quiz much. There was the occasional quiz that happened once a year or so, and I guess trying to follow Jeopardy or quiz bowl questions. Not a whole lot, but then I guess around maybe about 11, 12 years back, I wound up getting connected back into quizzing. And Movin Miranda, who I'd say in 2017, he topped WQC in Asia. So I'd quizzed with him a bit during my student days. And he wound up connecting me back into the quizzing community in various places. And I think started off with online quizzing. So things like the Learned League. Jane and Chris Jones used to run this thing called 2020 Quiz. Yeah, I mean, I wound up doing those questions every day, doing the 1 days, setting a few 1 day quizzes on European comics and graphic novels. And then from there, it just went on to trying to give the WQC, trying the Hot 100 quiz, and really getting back into it in a more regular way.
So what sort of quiz activity happens in Singapore? Is there a group of quizzes there who get together, or are you pretty much on your own there?
So we have a small but I'd say fairly high quality group of quizzes in Singapore. So we've got, I mean, apart from me, there's Caleb Liu, who scored, I don't remember the exact number, but I think it was 107 or 108 on the WQC this time. He usually gets 110 plus or so. There's Movin, who's based in Malaysia, but I think we do wind up meeting from time to time, and they're fairly regular quizzes that we do. There's one big annual quiz where we have teams from Singapore, Malaysia, the Philippines, occasionally from India coming in, and from Australia and New Zealand as well, participating. And I guess until we got locked down, we tried to be pretty diligent with doing the Hot 100 every month, America's quiz every now and then. We also had a few pub quizzes in town. Obviously, post-COVID, all that is gone now. But we did have a few pub quizzes, and the late Anthony White, who, I mean, if I recall correctly, he was a University Challenge champion in Australia at one point. And, he used to run a pub quiz at a pub called Brewworks out here on Tuesday nights, which saw a lot of participation and was really high quality. And I think that was a mainstay of the quizzing circuit in Singapore for a bit. There's not a whole lot now at this point. I mean, it's primarily online quizzing, so we still continue to I guess meet up on Zoom rather than physically to do quiz questions.
But it's a very different world now. Very different.
Yeah.
So was 2017 the first time you did the WQC then?
Oh, no. I did the WQC the first time in 2011, I think, or 2010. 2011, yeah. Yeah.
Okay. And so last
that's
year...
been
sorry, Karen.
Yeah, that was a while back. I think in 2011, I wound up getting 105 overall, I think. Dropped entertainment as usual and close to 100. And it's been steadily, was flat for 2-3 years. Then I got more into the quizzing circuit. Started to, I think, get familiar with a lot of older questions and question patterns again. And it's been steadily improving over the last few years. So I think I had 136 last year, 130 the year before. The one common factor is I usually get somewhere between 5 and 15 in entertainment and drop it.
Yeah. So this is a breakthrough year, really, in by any stretch of imagination. To go from like 45th, I think you were last year, first this year. What's your ambition for next year? Is it to successfully defend the title or hold a competitive position? It's going to determine what you do in the next 12 months. Well, actually, it won't be 12 months. You'll be the first quiz champion who will only be defending your title for 6 months. So how are you going to go about defending that title?
I'm definitely going to give. I think definitely going to give it a good attempt. I'd want to be competitive in another 6 months. I think at least make sure I'm in the top 10 or so.
Yeah.
And defending the title itself, I think a lot is going to depend upon which way the questions fall, on luck, how the others do. I think one of the things I'm fairly realistic about is there are probably a good 10 to 15 people who could take the WQC who are probably better than I am as all-round. There's a combination of factors that I think wound up with my winning the title this year. Not happen every time, so we're definitely going to prepare and try and make sure that I am near the top. But you never know.
Is there any ambition beyond WQC? Any other quiz ambitions you'd like to fulfill?
I'd definitely like to continue participating in, I think, as many quizzes as I can. There's the Quiz Olympiad in Krakow next year. Definitely love that. It's, I think beyond that, I guess one of the things I keep reminding myself is, I think ultimately this is a hobby. Yeah. And I've got a day job that's very important to me. I think a lot of people I know who have been affected by COVID. There are a couple of people I know who have, I think, been hospitalized, and at least one who died as a result of COVID. So definitely got, I think, some. I don't want to call it ambitions, but definitely got some priorities in terms of, I think, connecting with the people I know, making sure that they're staying safe, and I think what I can to help there.
Is there anything else that we should know about you to understand Ravi Avva, what makes you tick?
What makes me tick? I tend to be quite competitive, so and that usually comes out in, I think, most things I do. So if I'm playing chess or tennis with my son, he's going to beat me. He's not going to get a win easily. But I think I guess the only other thing that I can think of is I guess a couple of things. I think one, sports and quizzing are pretty important to me. Yeah. I think sports, not just by way of quizzing, but participating in them, making sure that I think both for me and my family, we kind of try to put health on top of our agenda. So that's something that's really important. And over the years, it's definitely helped us have a little bit more balance in terms of how we live. I guess the second thing is, and this is really about quizzing. I've rarely ever met a quizzer who doesn't tend to have a fairly balanced point of view. Simply because I guess to be good at quizzing, you've got to be curious, you've got to be inquisitive, and I think the more you read, the more you realize that. I mean, you may have less certainty about things in the world, but the more you realize that there are probably two sides to every argument. So, I mean, I remember seeing this quote once about the fact that there's no conviction greater than that of the man who's only read one book. That probably doesn't apply to most quizzes. So I find that a lot of people in the quizzing community tend to be really great people to talk to. You can exchange ideas, you can argue vociferously about them. And at the end of the day, they're quite likely to be able to, I think, put their idea aside and listen to the other side of the argument. So, and that's something that I think it's I think particularly in the world we live in. I mean, where you've got, I guess, a large chunk of what passes as news not being based on data and facts, but being, I guess, being driven by emotions and I guess ill-informed opinion. Quizzing can be a force for good, right? Because, I mean, that's one reason why I keep encouraging both my boys to quiz, and they participate in the Quizzing 101 quiz. They participate in the Junior World Quizzing Championship. I guess opens their mind to other things, other cultures, other possibilities, and I guess at the end of the day, realizing that there's something called facts, and facts and opinion are not always the same. Yeah.
Brilliant. Well, I don't think there could be a better note really to finish on. Ravi, once again, congratulations on winning the World Championship. I hope you enjoy wearing that crown.
Thank you, Gareth, and thanks for the conversation, and it was a pleasure talking to you.